Hi, folks. I don't know what happened. The recorder just went off. So we were back with Mr. Putter and Tabby, and they were in the garage. Tabby loved it when Mr. Putter said it was time to do something. She was still old, but she still liked excitement. She followed Mr. Putter into the garage where he found a ladder for pear picking. Then they went to the backyard where all the excitement was. Here they are in the garage. Two cranky legs. Mr. Putter had a problem. It was a ladder problem. Mr. Putter set his ladder against the pear tree, but he couldn't get up the ladder. Last year he got up the ladder, but this year he had cranky legs. Cranky legs, cranky knees, and cranky feet. He stepped onto the ladder and his legs were so cranky he had to get right off again. One trouble with being old, said Mr. Putter, is being cranky. Tabby knew what he meant. She had a cranky tail. Some days it was so cranky it wouldn't swish. It just stuck in the air like a stick. There she is. Cranky legs and cranky tails are no fun when you're old, especially if you want pear jelly. Mr. Putter looked at the pears still in his tree, and he thought, and thought, and thought. Tabby curled herself up and waited. She liked excitement, but she could wait for it. Do you see where she is? She's in the basket for the pears. Chapter 3, Zing! Ooh, this sounds exciting. What I need, said Mr. Putter at last, is a good slingshot. Mr. Putter knew about slingshots. He had played with them as a boy. They were good for knocking cans off logs. They must be good for knocking pears off trees. Tabby followed him into the house to make a slingshot. Here's Mr. Putter, and he's remembering when he was a boy and he had a slingshot. Mr. Putter found a pair of old underwear that he didn't like. He didn't like it because it was covered with poodles. His brother had given him the underwear for his birthday. His brother loved the underwear. He thought it was funny. Mr. Putter did not. Here's his underwear. So he cut up the underwear and got some very good elastic. Then he got an old glove. Then he got a stick and he made his slingshot. He took a piece of the glove here. This is the elastic, and he tied it on a stick. Mr. Putter and Tabby went back to the pear tree. Mr. Putter needed something hard and round to sling. Many of his apples had already fallen, so he picked up an apple. He put the apple in the slingshot. He aimed it at a pear in the tree and pulled back as hard as he could. Zing! That hard round apple went flying up, up, up over Mr. Putter's pear tree, over Mr. Putter's apple tree, over Mr. Putter's chimney, over Mr. Putter's house. Mr. Putter and Tabby watched it as it flew out of sight. Said Mr. Putter. He picked up another apple. Look at that. Zing! Up, 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 over, 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 out of sight. Wow, said Mr. Putter. He was smiling. He might have cranky legs, but he sure had jiffy hands. He picked up another apple. There we go. Zing! Another apple. Zing! Another. And zing! And he forgot all about the pears. I love this book because he's having so much fun with his slingshot. Tabby liked the first zings. By the 7th zing, she began to yawn. By the 10th zing, she began to nod. And by the 14th zing, she was sound asleep. Mr. Potter played with his slingshot all afternoon. He played through tea time, he played through supper time, he played until dark when he couldn't see the apples go up anymore. When he was finished, he had no apples and no pear jelly. He's going inside. He was a little embarrassed. He picked up Tabby and sneaked inside. Chapter 4, Juicy Days. The next afternoon, Mr. Potter and Tabby were sitting on their porch. They were feeling sorry for themselves because they still had no pear jelly. Suddenly, Mr. Potter's neighbor, Mrs. Teaberry, and her good dog Zeke came by. Mrs. Teaberry was carrying a big basket, a very big basket. So she said to Mr. Potter, "It is amazing. When I woke up this morning, there were dozens of apples in my front yard, and I don't even have an apple tree." Where do you think those apples in her front yard came from? I think you're right. I think they're Mr. Potter's apples. Mr. Potter looked at Tabby. "Amazing," he said. "So I made an apple feast," said Mrs. Teaberry. In the basket she had 14 apple turnovers, 5 apple pies, 6 apple jellies, and a gallon of hot apple cider with cinnamon sticks. There's Zeke. Mr. Potter and Tabby ate juicy things for days and days. And when he was finishing the last apple pie, Mr. Potter had an idea about those pears still on his tree. He would wait for them all to fall off then he would get his slingshot and start zinging. Where are those pears ending up? Over at Zeke's house and Mrs. Teaberry. Oh, he slings one. Even at night, he likes to use a slingshot so much. And here's Tabby in the fall leaves. Well, I hope you enjoyed Mr. Potter and Tabby Pick the Pears as much as I do. I just think it's a really fun book. And I will see you again tomorrow. Sorry about the breakup in the part 1 and part 2, but we got through it. See you tomorrow. Bye.